que nos han dejado. Saludamos a Octavio Marenzi, es CEO y founder en Opimas. Octavio, thank you so much for having us a few minutes. Pleasure. Good afternoon from Spain.
Thank you very much.
Octavio, as we say, we come from a week marked for central banks, Federal Reserve and the ECB, and we pay special attention to the main messages from Jerome Powell and Christine Lagarde. If we start with the US, Jerome Powell didn't want to say very much about recession in 2023. He says soft landing is yet possible, is still possible, but we don't know exactly what can happen in the coming months. But in case of a recession, how deep could be this recession in the US? Because Jerome Powell didn't want to say so much about this.
Well, you're absolutely right. Most recently, he did not want to say very much, but he's said quite a bit in the past about the levels of recession and unemployment that he's willing to entertain and willing to make us suffer through to tame inflation. And he's made it clear that there will likely be a recession and there will likely be higher unemployment, and that is the price that must be paid for getting inflation under control. I would say this, you ask how deep could this recession be? I think it could be very deep indeed. And the problem is so many different businesses, either knowingly or unknowingly, became very dependent on the central banks keeping interest rates very, very low. So if you were in the construction business, it was very easy to get very low interest rate loans, and that carried on for some time, for many years. Now suddenly you're in an environment where you can't do that anymore. So many business models basically have to fall apart because they need that cheap money, and without very low interest rates, the whole business model doesn't work. And that's either explicit or implicit in their approach. So the recession is likely to be quite bad, I think.
One of the most catastrophic voices among economists, Nouriel Roubini, talked about a soft landing. He says we can't bet on a soft landing, that it's not possible, that it's impossible, but I don't know if this is a impossible mission, as he says, because as we say, he's one of the most catastrophic voices. So is in which point he is being so much or too much pessimistic on this situation?
Well, I think Roubini is a permanent pessimist. He's been pessimistic for at least 15 years that I've been listening to him. Every time he opens his mouth, he makes it sound like the end of the world is coming, and that's what he's been doing for a very, very long time. In America, they have a saying that even a broken clock is correct twice a day. And this is the moment where his predictions, I think, are coming in to be correct again, where things look really bad. But he's been saying this forever, and he missed one of the biggest bull markets in the stock exchanges in our lives by basically being so negative on things. So I think he is just sort of reflexively and impulsively negative about the economy, about the market, and once in a while he's right, but often he's actually quite wrong.
As you say, even a broken clock is right twice a day. We say that in Spanish too. Meanwhile, if we pay attention to Christine Lagarde and the ECB, the ECB doesn't know how far it will raise interest rates, and is very confident, or not very, but much confident of a short-lived and shallow recession next year. But we don't know exactly if this is the main outlook or forecast that we have to take in mind. How do you see that in the case of Europe?
Well, I think Christine Lagarde, you know, I've been listening to central bankers for many years, and you always sort of try to interpret what do they really mean and what are they saying, and and try and sort of read between the lines in terms of their statements. Some central bankers are very straightforward and clear, and I think Jay Powell is one of those. He's actually very refreshingly clear, and you understand exactly what he's saying. I'm afraid with Christine Lagarde, it's quite the opposite. I sometimes listen to her presentations and speeches, and I have no idea what she said. And I just sort of scratch my head and try and interpret as best I can. I think Christine Lagarde is not quite sure where things are going and very uncertain, and frequently revises herself and changes direction quite abruptly when she sees that a particular approach is not working. But fundamentally, in Europe, we have the same problem in the US. Inflation is running high. The only way to get inflation under control is to tighten the money supply and increase interest rates, and that's going to be quite bad for many different businesses. And so that will likely cause a recession here in Europe as well. Now, how bad will it be? I wouldn't want to forecast, but I mean, like just in the US as well, a lot of businesses are going to have to readjust to a new reality in terms of interest rates. And the era of very cheap money that we've seen for a very long time has basically come and gone. And now interest rates are going to remain permanently higher, or at least higher for quite some time to come.
ECB is, in fact, unaware of the impact of initiation the reductions of balance sheet. We asked from Negocios TV in the press conference after its monetary policy meeting. They didn't want to answer us to this question, but De Guindos, the VP of the ECB, he admitted that they didn't know this impact. So we wonder if should we be worried about this unknown impact?
The unknown impact of reducing the balance sheet of the ECB. I don't think it's that unclear what the impact will be. I mean, you simply have to look at what the assets are that the ECB has on its balance sheet and what it's going to sell off, and the prices for those things will fall. Or if they're holding bonds and they're going to sell a whole bunch of bonds, the yield on those bonds will go up. And we've seen that happen already. I mean, we've seen that happen quite dramatically as the ECB has tried to reduce its balance sheet and try and sell off certain assets. The yields on those bonds go way up quite quickly because they're the biggest buyer in the market. So they basically dictate that. So I don't think it's fair to say that we don't know what will happen. I think it's pretty clear what does happen in that kind of scenario. When your biggest buyer stops buying and starts selling, they push prices down, and the price of bonds are going to go down, and that's the same as interest rates going up. So I think it's pretty clear how that unfolds. I suppose the question is, how does that impact the broader economy, and how bad is it going to get? And there is true, it's very hard to say. It seems most of the models that we've had so far in terms of forecasting where the economy is going to go and what inflation is going to be has actually turned out to be quite wrong. We've had central bankers for over a year now saying inflation is just about to disappear. It's a very temporary thing, and it's turned out to be quite permanent and higher than they had ever anticipated. So I don't think we can put too much faith in the economic models, but I think it's clear as they unwind their balance sheets, they're going to drive the asset prices down. And I think that's quite mechanical and pretty clear how that works.
Octavio Marenzi, CEO and founder at Opimas, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bueno, pues nos quedamos con este análisis.